Hi, everyone. I'm Lily Moayeri. As Hunter said, I am a contributor at Variety and also the television editor at Under the Radar magazine. We have the dream team with us today. We have creator, showrunner, and executive producer Austin Winsberg, music supervisor Jen Ross, and executive music producer Harvey Mason Jr. Thank you all for joining us. Before we get into just dissecting the show, could I ask each one of you to give a little bit more background on yourselves, just for context? Austin, we'll start with you.
You want me to just say what I do? I'm sorry. One more time.
Well, yeah, a little bit more, yes, about what you do on the show, but also just a little bit more background on what you've done previously. I mean, I know everything you've done because I read your bio inside out, but just for our attendees.
Sure. So I'm Austin Winsberg. I'm the creator, showrunner, executive producer of Zoey's Extraordinary Playlist. My bio, I started off writing, this could be long. I'll try to make it short. I started off writing in high school. I was a young playwright. I was a theater major in college. I came to LA and got staffed on my first TV show when I was 23 or 24 years old. And I've been writing TV, movies, and theater ever since. I had a show on Broadway a few years ago called First Date. I did the live Sound of Music for NBC. I've written on a bunch of shows and created some shows, but Zoey's is by far the one I'm most proud of and the one that's most personal and dear to my heart and means everything to me.
Jen, what about you?
Well, I'm Jen Ross. I'm the music supervisor on Zoey's Extraordinary Playlist. I have music supervised all different kinds of projects. A lot of them are very music-driven, things like Empire and Smash. I'm a music junkie that stumbled into this. I started in the record industry, and you may or may not know a little secret. The record industry went to shit, and I figured out a new thing to do. And I discovered music supervision, and it's just been a blessing and a ride ever since.
Brings us to Harvey.
Hi, everybody. Harvey Mason Jr. Not a lot to talk about my background, but right now I am an ardent disciple and loyal follower and mentee of Austin Winsberg. I go where he goes, I do what he says, and I listen and I learn. I've loved working on this show. I love what we've been able to do. I've done a lot of musical television and film projects before. Before that, I produced a lot of records for artists. Before that, I was writing songs myself and playing basketball. But this has been a passion of mine, all of ours actually, and something that we're very, very proud of. And it's so fun to be here with all of you to share some memories and talk about how we did it.
Yeah. The show is a wholly original concept in that the main character has a superpower where she hears emotions through song and dance, which means that each episode has 5 to 10 songs minimum, recognizable big hits from huge artists, and at least half of those are performed by the cast, either in part or in whole. And this season in particular deals with a lot of sensitive issues. I mean, the first season did too, but this season there was loss, there's grief, racism, family dynamics, postpartum, anxiety, depression. I mean, it just went through the whole spectrum of just really heavy things that all of us deal with at some point or another. And these were really, really propelled by your musical choices. Austin, at what point does the song selection begin? And what's the process for each selection goes before it airs? This may not just be a question for you. I'm just saying, because I know it's pretty early on.
The song selection probably starts with me hearing things on the radio or just driving. I can't listen to the radio anymore or hear any music without thinking, could this be a song on Zoey's? So I do have kind of a running list on my phone, on walls, of songs that I think sound like story songs, sound like a song I could hear Simon or Mo singing, songs that are kind of grouped in different categories. So I'm going to start with that. But the way it really starts is when we're breaking stories in the writer's room, or this past year in the Zoom writer's room. And we get to a moment in Act 1 where it's like, okay, now we need a song that deals with jealousy. And then it's sort of like, okay, well, what are some songs out there that have to deal with jealousy or the theme of jealousy or whatever the issue is we're tackling there. And then pretty quickly we'll lock into 1 or 2 or 3 songs that seem to sort of fit that bill. And that's when I will reach out to Jen in the outline stage, right there in the writer's room, texting, hey, can we get this song or this song or this song? And she'll say to me, please, dear God, avoid that one at all costs. It'll never happen. Or you might have to write a letter for that one. Or yeah, I think we can make that one happen. And then from that point on, it's a little chicken and the egg, but it's mostly derived from story. And I have rules for the musical numbers where each song needs to, it's kind of musical theater rules, where each song either needs to advance plot, reveal something about character, or be surprising and or funny, or some combo of the three. So if it checks those boxes, that's kind of step one. And then I get the studio and the producers and the network to approve of the songs at the outline stage, because we have such a short time to create these episodes that we have to get moving on the next steps, which start to include Harvey and Mandy Moore, our choreographer, after that. But that's the early genesis stage of it, is really right there in the day one of breaking a story and me writing down song moments on the board, or things that feel like this could be a moment that's theatrical or musicality in it.
So you kind of answered the next question I was going to ask you, which is how you work with Jen and Harvey. But I'm going to ask, okay, so Jen, you're starting to work on clearing the song, because I guess the song has to get cleared before Harvey even starts to work on it. Otherwise, he's working on something that maybe he might not be able to use. So then, Harvey, what do you do? Like, what's your process approaching the song that Jen has green-lighted for a particular scene?
Usually there's a conversation first between Austin and myself, and sometimes Mandy, to talk about what is the goal of the song, what is the intention of the characters who are performing the song, what are the story moments that are important and critical that we accomplish in the song. And that will really dictate what we do production-wise. That'll change the tempo, the feel, what's the instrumentation, who's singing what lines. And that's the conversation that we have. Once we make that decision, they turn me loose and I go into the science laboratory and start cooking and come back with something that hopefully sounds awesome. And hopefully Austin says, yes, I love this, Harvey. I love it. I listen to it all day. Sometimes he says, I think we need to be a little bit more like this, or I hear it a little bit more like that. So my job is really to interpret these many times classic, iconic copyrights and make them sound a little bit fresh without being offensive. Maybe I've been offensive a couple of times. Sorry about that. But also to try and get out of Austin's head what he's hearing the scene sounding like or looking like. So that's kind of what my job is.
And Jen, as you mentioned, you've done a lot of music-driven shows, and I don't think that the audience understands just how much more work that involves, because it's not just that, okay, we've got this, you have permission to use this for 30 seconds or 10 seconds. It's really rehearsing and presenting that, the preparation, in this case, a lot of choreography. Can you take us through what you have to do in that aspect of it?
We don't have enough time, but I could give you a brief breakdown. Again, it starts early on. I have a dialogue with Austin when he's breaking story. So it starts as soon as then, because when you're episodic, there's a rollout on all of this. So while we're working on one thing, we're prepping another, we're shooting another. It's a lot of prep time that goes into this. So we have a lot of conversations early on about whether the clearance works. Sometimes even creatively, we still maybe explore certain things. Sometimes things right off the bat we know, but you've got to allow time for, as Austin gets deeper in the script, sometimes some songs seem like, well, maybe we want to look at something else. Maybe this covers 3/4 of what we're looking at, but maybe there's another song that tells all 4 pieces of the story. So you've got to be dealing with all of that in terms of like the creative. And then there's also really just staying on top of schedule for all of us and making sure that there's not only enough time to clear, but then we all talk on a weekly basis. We have a standing call. We speak to each other literally from the minute we go into prep. We have a weekly call that is nothing but music status, where we are, where we need to be, what's coming next. So there's all of that mixed with, we're trying to get the song cleared. As soon as it's cleared, Harvey needs it so he can make something magical and then hand it to Mandy. And Mandy needs enough time to rehearse with it. Talent needs enough time to not only rehearse with Mandy, but then work prep themselves to go in a studio and record with Harvey. So then we can all get in front of a camera and all of that. It sounds like, ooh, that's not so bad. But it's a lot when you're dealing with it. We have 8 days to shoot before we move on to another. episode. And when you're dealing in that kind of turnover and you have anywhere between 5 to 9 songs in an episode, it's a lot. It's just a endless game of making sure we get to the finish line. But we've done it every time, which is amazing. And it happens because we've got an amazing team.
That's just, you're saying, oh, it doesn't sound like, it sounds like a lot. It sounds really very impossible, actually. I once counted all the songs on the show. And then, once it tipped over 100, then I started losing count. But I was I was actually counting there for a while. And you have some very, very high profile numbers, which other shows just don't have. Movies don't have. And I'm just like, wait, is that Elton John? I'm like, does he know? How
we don't tell a lot of people. We just start using it. We don't tell them. We don't ask, right?
But how are you getting such high profile syncs for this? What's your secret?
Listen, the secret is, frankly, Austin Winsberg created an amazing, heartfelt show, right? This is a incredibly real and honest show. And the way we're using music is a beautiful thing because we're telling stories, right? The lyrics of these songs actually become dialogue. And there's something about that that's very special. And when you approach it from that kind of place and you can really explain why this is important, I think those who create, artists, look at this in an artistic way. So they respond to it in maybe a different way than they would if it was just a background use. I think people are more prone to be motivated because there's something really special and emotional going here.
Yeah. So Harvey's hugely creative musician and producer, and each song and segment is different. And you did talk about this a little bit earlier. It's more about, I like whatever association I have with a recognizable song, which, pretty much all of them are, it kind of just gets disconnected from my previous association, and it becomes about what it is in the show when I'm watching it. And I kind of love that a lot. Not kind of, I do love it a lot, because sometimes, honestly, it's a song I don't even like, but I like it on the show. And I told you earlier before we started that sometimes I feel like I like the version on the show better than the real version, and usually that's not the case. So Harvey, what are you just trying to wipe out whatever association you have with the song before and just really make it into something? Because you did say they're recognizable songs and you are trying to give them a fresh life, and what goes into that? How do you do that?
I don't think we're trying to wipe them out, honestly. I don't know, Austin might speak to that. But I think our objective is to make something really cool and make something really special and something that we are proud of, something we like. I'm a music junkie. I'm nonstop music all day, 20 hours a day. I feel the same way about Austin. So we talk a lot about things we love, other types of music, examples of songs. And I think at the end of the day, when we're working on these, I know for myself, I'm trying to, number one, impress Austin, right? And Mandy. Mm-hmm. And I want them to say, oh my gosh, Harvey, that's the satisfaction I get when they call me and say, Harvey, I love this version. It's so cool. I've been listening to it all day. I'm also just trying to make things that I like personally. And I think that's been a trait that I've held pretty close to, or a philosophy that I've held close to during my career, is I don't necessarily try and make things for everybody else to get excited about, other than the people I'm directly working with and myself. And so when I'm in the studio making a version of a song, if it's a song that I love, then I'm obviously trying to take the things from that song that are special to me and meaningful. I'm trying to integrate that in with new things that I think heighten it or take it to another place or another level. Of course, always remembering what the objective is or what's the intention for that particular song. So it's motivated by making something that we think is cool, but also something that's going to tell the story, move the characters, move the plot, and is going to work for the show.
Yeah.
Go on.
No, I was going to say, and also, I think most of the time we try to stick to the integrity of the song, or, a lot of the melody of the song. I don't think there are certain cases where it's like, no, let's deconstruct this song and let's take this heavy, hard rock song and turn it into a slow ballad, where we're being very intentional with that choice. But a lot of times, especially we'll take songs that are known songs from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and we'll say, there's some instrumentation in here that sounds a little dated now. Harvey, can you kind of bring it into 2020, 2021. And then we're also talking about what's the emotional intent of the song. So a lot of it really starts there. You know, I started off season one, and I don't have anywhere near the music knowledge that Harvey has, that Jen has. So I started off season one being like, could we add some violin here, or like a little cello maybe? Like, and then it was like, no, that is not the way to approach this. The way to approach this is to talk about what's the emotional intent and what's the story drive. And so, and Mandy and I get together beforehand, and we do lyric breakdowns of the songs before we ever get on with Harvey, and talk about what part of the song do we want to use, what lyrically works story-wise, and then what is the intent. And especially that intent is very important for Mandy too, because every single number in the show is never just somebody standing there dancing. There's an idea or conceit behind every single number we do in the show. So those early talks with Mandy and I, even before we get to Harvey, are like, what do we want the feel of this to be, and what's a conceit that we can build around that? And once we start kind of locking in on that, then we get on with Harvey. And for me, it's like, yes, I can say to him, make this a little bit more R&B or a little bit more boy band pop or something like that. But it's kind of more talking about what do we want the character to be feeling, and what do we want the audience to be feeling. And I think if you come at it always from a place of what's the emotion and the tone and the story intent, and working with people that you really trust, you understand that what the goal is together, and then allowing Harvey to go off and create his own version of that, so much better than me being like, can we add a cowbell here?
Cowbell.
How much? Go on.
No, more cowbell.
More cowbell.
No, more cowbell, always.
That's my number one note every time.
How much, Austin, how much are you drawing from your own personal music that you use dealing with certain things in your life? I'm saying this because when I was going through some loss, I definitely was playing certain songs over and over, certain albums over and over. And even now when I listen to them, these are like years and years later, I go exactly back to how I felt at that moment. And I love those songs. They helped me a lot during that time. But I also I always think of them in association with that experience. How were there songs that you listened to yourself when you were going through certain things?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's kind of the power of music, I think, number one. Kind of, it's also like the power of smell. You know, like smell is that thing that instantly brings you back to camp in 1987 or so. You know, like I feel like music too so reminds you of certain times and places and moments where you were in your life. So there are definitely songs in the show that have a deep connection to me. The first one that popped to the top of my head, American Pie, was my dad's favorite song, and that's the song we used at the funeral back at the house. So there's certain things that are deeply intertwined, not only with me, but with a lot of things that had meaning within the show. But the other way I approach it too is like, the way that I sold this show from the beginning was I wanted the show to be accessible, and I wanted the music to be pretty universal. And so my music knowledge is about here, especially compared to probably everybody in here, it's probably here. And I always felt like for me to get behind a song, at least, and this isn't true 100% of the time, but most of the time, it needs to be a song that I have some degree of familiarity with. And I feel like if I have that familiarity, if I have that association, chances are, because my music knowledge is not out here, that most people will know this song and have some degree of familiarity with it too. And so I do think it's important. I'm not like Captain Strictly hits, which I think some of the writers call me sometimes, but it is important to me that the songs have to check a lot of boxes. They have to do what we need them to do story or emotion wise, and also be something that I think most people have some degree of familiarity with. And I do like kind of deviating from that every now and then, but that is kind of part of the rule process, if you will, of the show. And that they have me, and because those songs are popular, I think those are songs that have connected with people in real ways, and people remember from moments in time.
Yeah. Every time, a song starts, I just, it's so unpredictable every time. Like I would never be like, oh, this is when they would be playing insert song here. But of course, I'm always like, yes, that is what I want to hear right now. Both in terms of song selection and also the way each song is used in the scene. Jen, how do you stop these musical selections from being too on the nose? Or is that what you're going for? Or is it be like, oh, not this, of course you're playing this one right now?
Well, I think here's the thing that's the beauty of music, right? Not only do we all have our own attachments to it, it's also completely subjective. We all consume it differently. right? So, what is on the nose really at that point? Like, it's hard to say, because if it's touching people, especially within this story and in the way that we're using it, I think that we're nowhere close to ever being on the nose per se, because we're already using it in a different way. We're already doing something that we're kind of changing the medium, if you will, but just, by the beast that it is, I think that people are already consuming it a little bit differently, which I think gives us a little separation from being on the nose. I don't know, Austin, what do you think?
I think a couple of things on top of that. I think that Mandy and I, everything comes down to tone. And I have a kind of a broadness meter that starts to go off, or a cringe meter that starts to go off sometimes. And Mandy and I both have a cheese meter when we're trying to pick songs. So I think we try to avoid on the nose. Sometimes on the nose can be really funny if you're going for like a really funny moment. But we have found along the way, there have been songs that we thought could or would work. And then when Mandy gets into the studio with it, or we start to talk to Harvey about it, we realize this is an earnest moment. And this song has associations now that are corny or jokey now, or, what time has done to this song that was a great song in 1992. Suddenly now that song feels a little jokey. And so we'll have to kind of make a left turn away from songs that in the moment felt right. But then once she puts it on its feet, it's like, oh, this is starting to feel like spoof or parody. And we never, ever want to do spoof or parody. These are heart songs. So this is like what the people are feeling. And if what the people are feeling feels insincere or jokey, it kind of goes, I keep talking about the rules, but it kind of goes against the rules of the show. So, and also just having great tastemakers like Harvey and Jen and Mandy, like they will also be like, you sure you want to do that one? So I think we all kind of, we all have our meters up for that, and we try to be surprising, but also true. And so every once in a while, there'll be a song, like there were a lot of songs in the season finale, I'm Still Standing, you could perceive as like an overdone or used song, but in that context for Simon in that moment felt kind of hopeful and right. So I think like that's the piece of it I think Jen's talking about, like sometimes in a different context or in a different way, or the way that Harvey orchestrates it, and like it can recontextualize it and make it not the thing that could be cringy. Maybe there have been times where we have been cringy, but that's certainly our goal, to not be in that lane.
Yeah. I don't feel like it's cringy. It's all exactly the right thing. That's the other thing.
That's a tightrope. Sorry to interrupt, but that's a tightrope, because my biggest fear about the show from minute one was that it could feel cheesy. And like the tightrope that we walk we're doing a whole musical every 8 days on this show. The degree of difficulty and the amount of time we have to do it could so easily get very bad very quickly. And so that has always been part of our fear, is like, and to throw out a very old reference, and I barely know this show, so I apologize if anyone was involved with it. But the joke forever was like, don't be like cop rock, because that was trying to sort of like combine styles, and it was trying to be like an intense police show with suddenly broke into these musical numbers. And so we knew going in, like, if we're real and honest and authentic, then hopefully that mitigates whatever perception is of like, why is this person singing now? And to do that, you have to really lean into it, and the cast and believe in it and feel it. And I think that's what the cast and everybody does.
That's one of when you were mentioning all these different songs, one of the things that's another unique, interesting thing about the show is that you're not picking songs just from a particular era. Any song is game, and it makes things easier in a way, I suppose, because it's not like, oh, we want to keep it to the present time or anything like that. But it also makes it difficult, because there's just like, oh, but we could have used this one, or there's, oh, but what about that one? How do you, like, again, it goes back to song selection and what you feel is right, which we have talked about, but is there anything like where you're just trying to be like, okay, we've used too many songs from this time or that time, or it doesn't matter, or let's like bring some more current things that people might recognize, or anything that goes into the process?
100%, especially when we're breaking the episode, and we'll look at the board at the end when we have our 5, 6, 7, 4, whatever the songs are in the episode, and we'll be like, shoot, we have like 3 songs in a row that are like like 1994 to 1997, like something, and it's like, we know, like, so our goal every week is to have different genres, different time periods, always try to have something pretty contemporary in there. You know, I'll usually fall in love with like 2 songs and I'll be like, these 2 we have to do. And then these 3, maybe this one isn't quite right. And how can we bring another genre and another time period in it? So we don't necessarily start at that place, but we're pretty conscious of trying to give a wide range and diversity of songs and styles throughout.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Harvey, what's your approach with making those songs not sound too dated or not too of a time, especially with the older songs?
Yeah, it's a little bit same answer. I'm trying to make things that sound pleasing to me and things that I think will fit the show. I think we all do walk the tightrope between really paying homage to the originals and trying to do our own versions of them. We don't want them to sound like karaoke versions where it's just like, oh, they just tried to copy the original, sing over the top of it. So we try and keep them fairly contemporary unless there's a need for them to sound of a period. We always just go through the sonics, the instrumentation, just the rhythms, the way that it's being produced to make sure there are things that are interesting to us, interesting to our audience. And again, just trying to make stuff that's cool.
The glitch episode is one I definitely want to talk about. That was really fun for me because I thought it was even more inventive than the other ones, and trying to make those connections. It's like, wait, whose song is this really? And it, really kind of ended up in a heartbreaking way, but it was also, a great kind of opening to what was going on with the sister-in-law. Let's talk about how you came up with that one and how you worked together to make that happen. Because that could have gotten, well, it was confusing, but that could have gotten like annoying confusing. And instead it became more like, ooh, let's discover what's happening. Like, let's try and make those connections ourselves before she makes them.
So that was a very, very challenging episode to break. And season 1, we did a big glitch episode, which was probably my favorite episode of the season. Mm-hmm. And that's when Zoey sang all the songs. And I decided it would be cool to do an annual thing on the show, if we were so lucky, to each season have some form of a glitch episode. And I forget, I think it was me, maybe it wasn't, but the idea came up at some point, what if the songs were switching? And I think it came a little bit from watching, I don't know if you guys know what Miscast is on Broadway, but they do a Broadway night I think it's called Miscast, where Broadway performers come out on stage for all fellow theater and Broadway people and perform songs that they would never, ever get to sing on, that they would never be cast in that role. And so it's always like the least likely person to sing this song, but then they come out and kill it on, I'm telling you, I'm not going from Dreamgirls or some least likely person you would expect to do it. And I've seen some of those clips online, and I'm always charmed and blown away by and again, it's like this recontextualizing where you see someone doing something unexpected. And so I was kind of inspired by that idea of Miscast. And then it was like, oh, we could have fun with this with our people. Like, what's a kind of song that Alex or Mo would never want to sing? Mo would never want to sing country. So let's give Alex a country song. And then it was kind of like, what's, And then the second part of it was like, how do we make it clear? Because we came up with this idea that could kind of be like a detective story, a little bit of a mystery, a little bit of a Law and Order thing, and sort of Zoey figuring it out as she goes. But it meant we had to be really clear. So we had to pick songs and lyrics so that you could even remember later, okay, the programmers were singing the song, One is the Loneliest Number. One is the Loneliest Number is a song that the mom would sing. So now we need to give the mom a song that is a dual thing, a duet to play back as if so it was a lot of mental math and changing around on the board and figuring out the rules of that for days and days, and then figuring songs that were clear enough to explain the intent of what we were trying to do. And then surprises, like we've never had a little kid sing on the show, so wouldn't it be cool to have a little kid sing, but sing something that's like a really heartfelt, like Love on the Brain, Rihanna, that an older person would sing, and you'd never expect that coming out of an 8-year-old. That was the conceit.
That was stunning. Jen, what was your role in that, in trying to find the matching songs and trying to make it work?
It's funny, again, Austin and I talk a lot right at the time. So the first text was a battery of these songs, and we'll talk about who's doing what so I can, try to understand. And I got like, this for Mo, this for Mary. And I couldn't understand because I didn't know it was a glitch episode. We didn't talk about the glitch episode. So I've got this battery, and I just remember texting you back like, what? could you walk me through this? Like, what are we doing? But, a lot of what Austin wanted from the top, we actually wound up going with. The hardest piece of the puzzle that it took us a while to work on actually was the Emily song, because it was something that we wove through it, right? And there was actually a different song that we looked at originally, actually a Sia song. And it was really hard to find something that we had to, Max is the tip off. It needed to be something that didn't feel like Max, that you start to go like, wait a minute, something doesn't smell right, and take us through this whole journey. But it also had to be something that teed up what is a greater storyline that we play out more even in the following episode in 10, which is Emily's postpartum depression. And, being able to kind of workshop a bunch of ideas and land on anyone was a experience that took a minute, but I think it worked out really, really great.
I remember with that one too. It's funny you say these things and suddenly it brings back the memories. Like, I remember that even in the script, it was like Max sings the most heartbreaking song we've ever done on Zoey's. So it's like, that's a high bar. Like, what is the most emotional, gut-wrenching song? And Anyone was not a song in Austin's, vicinity of songs he knows. That one was a little outside of. I didn't know that song, but the first time I heard it, I was like, lyrically, it's devastating. It's vocally something that I knew Skylar and Alice could do and really feature them. And Harvey had a great time with that one. And it was just so, it was so raw and honest and deeply emotional. So that song just checked boxes in a way that a lot of other songs didn't quite achieve those emotional depths.
That song, I was like, oh, I think it's my new favorite song now. I just never paid attention to it that much before. And after that, and then when I got to hear it more than once, I was like, it's just so beautiful. And I wasn't even feeling the way the song or the emotion of the song, but I started feeling it just because it really is so powerful. But let's talk about your original song for the series, Crimson Love, Austin and Harvey, your masterpiece. So give us a little
shining hour.
So how come you thought about doing an original rather than using something that already was there? Is it because then she would hear it as a heart song?
Yeah, that was built into the conceit of the idea. The idea always in the room, once we started talking about Aiden and David joining Aiden's band. Aiden was really brought more in for a David story than for a Zoey story, even though it kind of seemed like he was brought in to be a love interest. It was really kind of a bridge into what David was going through. And we thought it was funny that David joins a band with guys who are 12, 14 years younger than him. And we just thought it was a funny idea that David motivates Aiden to write a song that he doesn't know at the time is a kind of very sexual love song inappropriate to his own sister. And he only discovers during the song as Aiden is singing it, oh my God, this is about Zoey. And so we wanted the opportunity to at least because of the conceit, it's very hard to bring original songs into the show. And I just having done a musical with all original songs, I liked the opportunity to try to bring that in, and it just seemed like a really funny comedic notion. And again, always on the show, we're always trying to think of ways to twist how you do songs. There was one episode in season 1, where it's episode 11, where someone is singing karaoke at a karaoke bar while another person is singing a heart song behind the person singing the karaoke song. And so we're always just trying to think of fun and inventive ways to twist the rules and twist the ideas. And one thing that we hadn't done yet was an original song. And so when we came up with that idea in the room, it started with that idea, and it just felt like a funny road to go down. And I liked the challenge of having an original song on the show.
What about you, Harvey? What was your thought and approach with Crimson Love?
My complete thought was, how awkward is this? This is creepy, this is cringy, and I loved it. It was great. The start of it was really the lyrics, and Austin came to me with the lyrics and said, can we turn this into something? I said, absolutely, this is hilarious, once I understood what the purpose was of the song. And we tried to make it a song that, first of all, sounded cool and something that we would have liked to listen to, but also remembering it was like the garage band next door. So you didn't want to go crazy with the overproduced sound or some really extravagant sounding song. You wanted to sound authentic to what those guys generally probably could have played, but you also wanted to make it sound interesting. So I took the lyrics, worked around some chords. You sit at the piano, you work through it until you find something that feels right and sings right. And then also it's a little bit different because a lot of times when I'm writing songs, I'm writing the melody first and then we'll fit words into the top of that. But this was, on this occasion, we had the words. We were figuring out how do we fit that into an original song. So it was fun. I had a great time, and Austin did his thing with those cringy lyrics.
But I mean, just to talk, like, this is where tone is everything, because there was a lot of, again, it's like you're trying to hit a sweet spot. It had to sound like a garage band. They couldn't sound too good, but we still wanted to be kind of pop and kind of catchy. So it had to sound in the beginning like a real song that maybe you could hear on the radio. And everyone's like, oh, isn't this sweet that he's doing this for her? And then the more it goes on, the more it's like, wait, what's happening? And so some of that was like in the writing, and I had never written a song before. So to be able to kind of write those lyrics down, to at least get it kind of in the tonal place of what I thought it should sound lyrically. But then Harvey took that and so elevated it. I remember even the very first time I heard something back, I'm like, this sounds like a real song. This is amazing. So really, like, he just took whatever my stupid lyrics were to get to the such a next level. It
is a real song, Austin.
Yeah, it was. It
is very much a real song. It's interesting what you said earlier about how you actually brought that character in more for David than for Zoey. I assumed it was for Zoey, because I was like, oh, yet another love interest. And then I saw the shift, but I was just like, wait, it's much more interesting what's happening with David and this guy. And then it turns out that it was actually a vehicle for him anyway. It wasn't aimed at Zoey. But Zoey looked like she was having a good time with him in the beginning. She thought he was cute, and
that first episode with her and him. We could talk for a while about all the love stuff in the episode, in the season. But this whole season was about Zoey's journey of recovery. And I wanted it to be a messy journey. And I even wrote on the board, recovery, relapse, regression, rebirth, and redemption. Those were going to be her stages of grief through the season. It was very charted out that way, because grief is not a straight line, and it's messy, and sometimes you're feeling better and then it gets worse. And I wanted to do one episode that was a rebellion episode. And I felt like Zoey is not somebody who's really ever rebelled in her life. And that was a little bit me. I was never like a big rebel. And I thought, and we also liked the opportunity, again, trying to twist things in the show, like what would a musical number look like for Zoey when she's high? And so a lot of the idea of Aiden was a vehicle for her to rebel, and a vehicle to get her to get her to a high place, so we could see a Zoey number high, which was something we talked about from early on in season 1. And we actually did have a moment that we ended up kissing, that we ended up cutting in episode 5, where Zoey and Aiden kissed. And we ended up having to cut it for time. But that was also leaning into why he's now even more into her, and her she realizes at the end of the episode that the young 22-year-old is probably not a good road for her. And we just thought then it led to a funny opportunity with David.
Yeah, no, it's great. I love it. I have a question from the audience, from Christine Laporte, who says, what is your favorite song in season 2 and why? This is for each one of you. So Jen, I'm going to throw you in the hot seat. Barely giving you a chance to think about it.
Oh, wow. I mean, listen, it's hard. I mean, I think we're all going to say that's kind of like saying pick your favorite child. That's almost impossible. For me, it's tough. I'm going to go with Shake It Off in the finale, in the sense of it's such a wonderful, joyous moment. And it's something that is a joyous moment and a relief for all of our characters. And that's what I love about it. Not only is it a great big group number, I just feel like we got a moment for each and every character and their storyline and whatever turmoil they went through, for them to literally shake it off. And there's just something about that in a finale was just very cathartic and amazing.
How about you, Harvey?
I'm looking through my list right now. I'm trying to decide. It's hard. Holy moly. I have a soft spot for Rosanna, of course. I just love that song. I don't know. Maybe I'm old school. I Look to You. I really enjoyed, Mo's version of that. And that song is kind of special to me. I have to say Crimson Love was one of my favorite moments on the show. And just the satisfaction of having pulled that off and knowing, what it was and how we kind of came to that song, and then seeing them perform it and just remember cringing. That was a really cool moment and one of my favorites. So those are a few of my favorites.
How about you, Austin? I mean, I'm this is your baby, so.
Well, it's hard because it's complicated because it's like, how do you define it? Do you define it by the choreography and the production of it, or do you define it by the sound of it and the music of it? I can, my head was sort of just racing through from the first episode. I really loved Carry On because that was kind of the message of the season. And Mandy and I had a hard time figuring out how to choreograph that number. And when we came up with the idea of the family setting the table and everybody freezing in a moment, figuring out how to do all of that as a oneer, a lot of the songs we do on the show are all shot in one fluid shot. And it felt like such a, I don't know, we felt a lot of creative fulfillment when we felt like we got a version of it that made us happy. So, and I felt like it was such a thematic idea and a beautiful idea to see the family setting the table, coming together, still the empty spot at the table without dad, but they're going to have to carry on. That felt like a good combination of theme, idea, conceit, all of that. I really loved the number in episode 2 when Max is singing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" mixed with "I'll Make Love to You." We spent 2 weeks rehearsing that like a one-act play. It was like one of the few times where we actually got a little time to really explore it and play with it. And I thought Skylar did great work there. Black Man in a White World is one of my favorite numbers of the whole season. Not only that's the song itself, but also the way that it sounded and the way that John Clarence Stewart did it on the day. My jaw was on the floor. He was so in it. And that minute and a half of like TV alone, to me, I think is one of the most powerful things we ever did.
Yeah. And Michael Kiwanuka is a friend of mine. He would approve. Definitely. If anybody's interested, my favorite is Anyone, both times. That's definitely my favorite. I didn't even have to think about that one. Okay, we have another question from Mary Garrison. Seems like in the beginning, you started each show with music, but then you stopped having music up front. Is that correct? How was that decision made?
You mean starting with a song? I guess
maybe the song was earlier in each episode?
I'm not sure. My apologies, Mary Garrison. I'm not sure that's totally true.
Is she referring to season 1 rather than...
No, there were moments where we started an episode with a song, like episode 2, season 1, we started with "I've Got the Music in Me," which was a dream number, but I can't think of too many episodes. And the season finale this year started on Sing, but I can't think of, can you guys, Jenna, Harvey, think of, I don't think there was too many episodes that started on a song.
I mean, the times we've done that, again, they're dream sequences. We've done that when Zoe has been dreaming, like Rise Up, for instance, she wakes up to Mo sing. Like, we've done that, but I don't remember us like stylistically opening with the song.
I think we always made a choice to make sure that we always had a song in Act 1, because to let people know they're watching a show that has music in it, that's a musical type show. But I don't think there was a thing. I don't think from the beginning we necessarily had songs up top all the way through.
Yeah, because I'm trying to remember, because I remember watching season 1, when it first aired, and yeah, it does come in quickly, but you couldn't bring it in too quickly because you'd be like, wait, what's happening? Yeah, Why is this happening?
Right, like our first big number in the pilot was Help, and that's the end of Act 1. Mm-hmm. Although it does start with Mo singing and waking Zoe up. So maybe Mary's onto something. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. But I do, yes, you're right. It is in the dreaming sequences, but a lot of times it doesn't feel like it's a dream. Like it takes me up and I'm like, wait, could this be happening? And then, because it's Zoe, it could be happening. Anything could be happening. So, but yeah, and then realize.
Yeah, and Sing is kind of like American Pie. There are a few times where I've made the choice. Again, we have such specific rules in the show where it's like you don't do time cuts within numbers because the numbers are happening in the moment. So it's not like a music video where you cut to her in the bathroom, you cut to her in the office, you cut to her, whatever. Like it's all kind of happening in pseudo real time. But like American Pie and Sing were two that we made the choice to be more mood pieces that were more indicative of a feeling that happened over a day or over several hours. So we do make certain choices like that sometimes.
Another question from Alex Weinstock. Once you become familiar with the actors, their voices, and the way they emote, did that color the song selection process? That's a great question.
Yeah, I'll start with that, but then you guys can take it. Absolutely. I mean, we're always like Alex Newell is like Whitney Houston. He can do anything. So you're always thinking, you never want to how do you say that? Like there's certain people in the cast who have incredible vocal range and ability. And so anytime you can give them a song that can show that more, that's a goal. And I think sometimes it's like, you know, and the actors have said to me, like, and they'll like, I'll give Skylar's another version of this where he'll be like, I like that song, but it doesn't really challenge me. Like that's like basically like 2 or 3 notes in that song. So can we maybe, you know, what are you going for here? Can we talk about something else that maybe has a little more range or a little more, and I think any times that we can still be true to what we're doing story-wise, but show off the talents of the cast, that's always a great thing to be able to do.
Anything to add, Jen or Harvey?
Yeah, I think the same thing. I think you're trying to find a sweet spot between not just picking songs to show off the vocals, but you're picking songs that work for the characters and for the story, because we do have some great singers. There are singers that can sing anything and it sounds really good, but sometimes that can be deceiving. You have to still pick songs that are hitting the right emotional beats, regardless of how much vocal gymnastics they have in them. So I found it's easier, not so much in picking songs, but picking keys and picking ranges. So you know by the halfway through the first season, which characters sound better in their lower tones, which ones you need to push vocally and get it up in a higher key or higher register. And also you start to learn where they can really resonate emotionally in certain parts of their voice or with their instrument, because sometimes you want them to feel very sad or introspective or emotional, and you start learning, okay, there's this little pocket in such and such's voice where they really nailed that feeling. And that's the shorthand that I think we started having a little further into the season so that we could really accomplish what we wanted with the songs that Austin was choosing.
How about you, John?
Sorry, everybody will always want to be able to have crazy vocal gymnastics. And sometimes we have to be like, okay, but that might not exactly be what we need here.
To that effect, there's another side of it too, that there's certain situations we always track no matter what. We always put everybody in the booth and we record them. But there are certain songs based on who's singing them, what the context of the scene is, that will grab vocals live in the sense that there's certain things that in the moment, if you grab them live, you may get a certain inflection in their vocal delivery that we couldn't have planned for by putting it in the booth. That emotion will really hit. And that's the other thing that's kind of interesting about this is it's a math of what works for the story, what works for talent that's singing it. And then also emotionally, we have to make decisions of what do we just want to use playback? What do we want to try to live record in order to give it as much magic in the moment as possible?
Michael Daly asks, have you ever had to change a song because it's not working on set? And how did you flip that quick? This is something I thought of earlier when you were talking about the amount of time it takes to get everything just done. And I was like, wow, what if it wasn't working? So thank you, Michael Daly, for asking what was in my head.
So there's been a handful of times, we could probably count them on 1 or 2 hands, where there were a couple times where I tried to push songs through the network that they said yes to, but then when they saw the finished script, they said no. And it almost really screwed us up because it was like just on the brink of how we don't have enough time to produce this now. A few times where that happened was a song in particular that I thought was funny and unlikely for a character in the moment that the network thought was too, they didn't get the joke. So like, for instance, there's an episode where Lee feels really sad and small and like little boyish. And we thought it would be funny for him to sing Castle on a Cloud from Les Mis, which actually ended up being one of the most expensive things we ever tried to clear. But they thought that was too jokey. We also had Somewhere Over It's Not Easy Being Green, or there was some Muppet song they also felt like. And then there was a song in season 2 when David hears that Aiden's in a band, we wanted him to sing Part of Your World from Little Mermaid because he just wants to be so desperately be part of his world. That was another song that we got fairly far along with that the network was like, no, it's not. So there's been that. The thing that I always say to the executives is like musicals that we do a show in 8 days. Musicals take 8 years to go to Broadway. You do all these out-of-town tryouts and readings to see what works and what doesn't work. We do not have that luxury on this show. We are so run and gun by the end that we shoot the thing that we try. there were a couple times early on, I think once in season 1, maybe once or twice in season 2, where we realized we were doing something that broke one of our own rules. So I'm trying to think how I can tell this story without names. We had a song that was the song was Put on a Happy Face. And the character was doing stuff in the number that was trying to be putting on a happy face while destroying things. And it was this like weird, almost Joker-like juxtaposition between I'm happy, but I'm really suicidal, or like I'm really homicidal, or whatever. Like I'm really volatile in this moment. And so I'm acting happy while doing things that indicate opposite. And it was all played like a performance out to people in an audience. And we realized, oh, this is a cool theatrical conceit, but it breaks all of our heart song rules. And we had shot the number on the day and it didn't work. And it wasn't through the fault of anybody involved other than it was a theatrical idea that would be cool in some contexts, but didn't work for the show. And we had to ask the network and explain to everybody why it didn't work. We had to pick a song that was more truthful and heartfelt. And Mandy had to go and we reshot a different number. But so, and then we've had to cut a few numbers for time, which is always a bummer. But most of the time it's like you get your shot and that's it.
Wow. Anything to add?
Was there any other numbers like that, guys, where we shot it or realized it was wrong and we couldn't do anything about it?
I don't think so. Generally, there were definitely occasions where we rehearsed it and you guys danced it and had the choreo, and we would get that far into the process. And I think somebody would recognize, this isn't feeling good. We do a last minute swap. I think we did quite a few of those where we spent a lot of time on it and it just didn't work itself out. So we tried something different.
Yeah, it just gets hard, because you're just up against that shooting deadline. So you would just it's just all about how much time and bandwidth we have. And there was one time I remember early on in season 1 where we had to pull the ripcord on a song like 2 or 3 days before we were supposed to start shooting because the actor had a problem with it. And I had to adjust an entire script on the fly. I mean, there are things like that happen.
Wow. Another question, this one from Steve Abramson. Question for the panel. Love fast cut to titles with a line that ends with implied word, which Zoey says in the beginning. Whose idea was that and what was NBC's reaction? I actually love that too. I think that's super fun. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? You understand?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was my idea. I wrote it in the pilot. I think it was like what the F, and then we cut to black after that, after help, because it was like, I need something big to end the act on with a button. And I think it was Richard Shepard, our director of the pilot, or our editor, David Dean, who came up with the idea of the kind of the swipe over the mouth rather than just a hard cut. And then I think Richard was the one who said to me, Austin, you should do that every week. And I was like, that's really funny. Let's try that. And then the only pushback I got from the network, this is like one of their few standard and practices notes every single week, is that they always would, I think it's funnier if you could hear the sh or the f or whatever it is. And they always made me change the f. No, I had to cut out before you could even hear the f noise, even before the mouth makes the F movement. And you had to bring up the guitar strum a tiny bit earlier. So every episode, it was always negotiating with standards and practices over 2 more frames at the beginning of the sound. Every episode for 25 episodes, I had that conversation with them. And I'm like, why can you say what the fork on Good Place, but you can't say what the F and then cut on Zoey's? But they had a whole logical argument in their mind why what the fork is okay, but what the F is not.
I'm seeing a few more questions come in, so I want to give a chance for those to come through. Okay. Give me 1 second. They may not come through. They may, but I just want to give it a second. Did all the cast members come from a musical theater background? That's a legit question.
No. I mean, Alex Newell and Skylar Aston do, and Michael Thomas Grant does. But Jane did not come from it at all. Jane Levy, who plays Zoey, and like she's like most improved, most valuable player, all those things. she just like tears in heart and soul, commits to everything she can do. And like, she did a little bit of dance and a little bit of singing growing up, but this much, not in her comfort zone. And like, dance has become her happy place and she just goes for it. And I mean, Harvey can speak to her singing abilities too, but like, she's just like a natural talent who kind of came in with very little training.
Wow.
You want to say anything about her?
Yeah, very talented. Love just the work ethic and personal style that she brings to it. And she definitely makes all the songs her own, pretty quickly, which is, I think, something that we try to do is find out what is the cast doing to these songs that makes it sound unique and special. And then she nails it.
Yeah, I mean, John Clarence Stewart, who's another one who just crushes it every time, had very little of that background. Alice Lee, who plays David's wife, Emily, she comes from a theater background. Andrew Leeds has somewhat, so varying, I guess the answer is varying degrees of that throughout. Everything from like true Broadway people like Alex and Skylar to people like Jane or Mary Steenburgen who come from with very little of that.
Yeah. Thank you all so much for your time and your insight. I would never imagine that I would ever get this opportunity to like really dissect Zoey's extraordinary playlist like this. So it was an honor for me. Thanks again.
Thank you.